we go on delegation trips, our colleagues, throughout the world. I just, as I said, recently went to Bangladesh, but I've been to Japan on 2 occasions. And when I go to Japan, I speak to the leaders and business leaders and implore them to invest money in the Bronx and to help the island of Puerto Rico after their disaster. I spoke to Ambassador Yamanuchi on several occasions. And yesterday he invited me to the consulate for dinner to tell me that as a result of me annoying him, that the Japanese government will be meeting next week with leaders of banks and businesses from Puerto Rico because they want to invest money in the island. That is certainly what it's all about, doing things for people that are marginalized, need the most help, and we do that every day in the New York State Senate. So thank you to my colleagues. Thank you, Stuart, and all my colleagues in government, because with you, life is a lot easier. Now, on April 21st of 2018, I was honored to be elected as a new New York State Senator for the 32nd Senate District. And since then, I have worked diligently on behalf of the people that reside in this area. Oh, and by the way, there's a friend of mine, Dr. Glenn Baraka, who was one of the first people to give me a nickel of a contribution to the Assembly. Hung Sung back there also, one of the earliest supporters I ever had. Thank you so much. My working here for the regular team is a labor of love for me. I really love government service. I really love knocking on doors and in the middle of the night going to night developments because an 87-year-old senior doesn't have heat. Those are the things that we love doing. It's something that we're all compassionate about, but our job is made much more difficult these days because we have a president in the White House who demonstrates zero compassion for human suffering, zero respect for the rule of law, and actually has a certain disdain for the communities of colors that we all represent in the state of New York. And as a result of that, my colleagues and I, my colleagues in the conference, we have to work double overtime to stop the nonsense that the Republicans and federal government are trying to bring to this country, build that wall in New York State to stop it from coming in here. Our state is a state of compassion. Our state is a state of immigrants, and we respect everyone. And we have a president who puts people in cages, children in cages. We have a president that refers to African American nations in the most deplorable manner that a president has ever done. We have a president that refers to a certain Latino group as rapists and criminals, and a guy who finds good people in a white supremacist march. We have a president, as impeachment is looming, who clearly has no problem using his own power as the president for his own personal and political gain. And you know, lately he's had this dialogue talking about how under his presidency, African Americans have the lowest unemployment rate, and so do Latinos. We know what that's about. The reality is that when you adjust it for inflation, the buying power, the salaries of African American and Latinos have gone up 1.8%. Yet the richest people, who he just recently gave a tax break to, their purchasing power, their wealth has increased 1,000-fold. So let us not get fooled, as some people in our own community are being fooled. This president is doing nothing for this country. This president is doing nothing for the people of the state of New York. And this president is doing less for communities of color. Now, as a result of that, we had a very, very historic session where we passed so many progressive bills, so many things that help everyone, so many things that help the most marginalized people in the state of New York. Think about it. Think about what we've done. We've passed rent regulations, historic rent regulations. No matter what you hear, and forget about the fear-mongering you're hearing lately about criminal justice reform in the state of New York. A lot of fear-mongering going on right now. The reality is that there was no fear-mongering when black and brown men and women were being incarcerated at absurd rates to maintain a prison economy, to maintain an economy upstate. And so we, under the leadership of our leader and Jamal Bailey and the Codes Committee, we completely transformed the criminal justice system in the state of New York. The day that the law passed, you are no longer, the ability to get justice in the state of New York is no longer dependent on your bank account. It is no longer dependent on the color of your skin or the zip code that you live in. It is the fairest system that will not incarcerate mostly black men and women because some of them can't afford to pay a $200 bail. Mm-hmm. That is not justice. That is not justice. When Jeffrey Weinstein can pay $1 million bail to get out of court, to get out of prison, and yet a poor person has to languish in prison in a system that should be broken apart and started afresh. That is not justice. That is criminal, that is racist, and that is not what I want in the state of New York. So thank you, Jamal, thank you for transforming that. We've spoken about the DREAM Act. Now, the leader gave me the honor of being the sponsor of that bill. But make no mistake, the person that deserves most of the credit for bringing DREAM Act to the state of New York, and that was now deceased Senator Jose Peralta. We have also reformed the election laws to allow people to participate more in the election process. I don't know what else to say about the green light bill. The green light bill cost me my hairline. I think I aged in dog years. So I was 55, I'm 138 years old now. But it was a great battle. It was a fantastic battle, and thank you again. I cannot tell you how grateful we are. 750,000 people will be impacted.
Yes, sir.
Children who couldn't get to medical appointments will now be able to do that. And it's good for the state. It's going to increase our economy, it's going to make us safer. So no matter the nonsense that you hear coming from conservatives and Republicans, the green light bill is going to be a boon for the economy of the state of New York. For our friends in the LGBT community, we passed gender, something that was bottled up for so many years. And we passed gender, which is a very important piece of legislation for that community. And we're going to continue to push, especially for the transgender community, which are still victims of law enforcement. Victims of law enforcement. Charged with crimes, arrested for things that they are just doing, like standing in a street corner and being who they want to be. No one should be targeted for that. We also passed the Child Victims Act for those young children who are now adults, who were sexually molested, are now able to bring action against those that preyed upon them. We want to thank Senator Brad Hoylman for that. Yes. And a slew of many other pieces of legislation. Now, what we do, what I do, goes beyond legislation and fighting for more money for our district. Our district office, I dare say, is, I believe, the busiest entire district office in the state of New York.
Second busiest.
No. We had a countdown from the day I became the senator in this area until today. We have seen 10,122 constituents. And it's little things that they need. People who are about to get evicted, who need help. People who are victims of domestic violence, who need help. Something so simple as a senior who cannot see well and needs someone to read a letter. Something so simple is what we do. Now, we have a lot of more work to do. Clearly, there's some things that we're going to be working on next session, things that are important to me. Clearly, we have to do more for the healthcare system in the Bronx. Yes. The irony is not lost on me that the largest employer, non-government employer in the Bronx is Montefiore Hospital.
Yes, sir.
Yet, we have the worst health scores in the entire state. We have to work more on housing issues. Yes. Affordable housing, housing for our seniors, housing for disabled, for our veterans, is a priority for me and for our conference, and we're going to work to make sure we straighten that out and straighten out the mess in NYCHA. Danny Barber said it eloquently. NYCHA has many, many problems. I am now the night rider. I am now creeping up on people's apartments in NYCHA at night to videotape them and send it to the leaders of NYCHA and the mayor. We have our friend Susie, whose mother, an 86-year-old woman, called us. She was very, very cold in her apartment, and we went there. We videotaped it. And we shamed NYCHA into acting immediately, and the next day she had heat. That's what we all do as elected officials. The TA leaders are critical to what we do. Thank you so much, each and every one of you, for the great work that you do. We have to do more for our educational system here. Unfortunately, even though things are improving, students in our district still graduating about 66%, when the rest of the city excels 85%. And so our kids continue to fall behind. And we have to do everything possible to bring more money to our educational system here in the Bronx, in our district, and also to make sure that we get high quality teachers here. Because one of the things that we experience in our community is that the Department of Education dumps their worst performing teachers in our communities. And so this should not be a warehouse for bad teachers. This should be a breeding ground for future scholars and leaders in this country. Now there are many issues that we face as communities of color, gender communities. For example, we're going to be working diligently because, as the leader recently made known, one of the priorities that we have is to close the income gap between women of color, women in general, and white males. It is inherently unfair that a woman of color earns about 66 cents for every dollar that a white male earns for the very same work. It is inherently unfair, and we're going to work to make sure that we correct that wrong. Now, I have, as the chair of the Corrections Committee, some important pieces of legislation that I'm going to continue to work for. Yes. One is the issue of solitary confinement. Guess who suffers the most from the use of solitary confinement? It's black and brown women and men that are incarcerated at ridiculous rates. Over 85% of black and brown inmates, or people that are incarcerated, are the ones that are sent into solitary confinement. And you know what? Currently, the Journal of American Medicine did a study that says that individuals that are subjected to solitary confinement have a shorter lifespan. Within a year, a good percentage of them, over 60%, die of drug overdose use. Within a year, they're victims of homicide or suicide. That is what solitary confinement does. And I'll be damned that as the chair of the Corrections Committee, that I'm going to accept that. We also have to release our elders that are incarcerated. Yeah. We have here Jose Saldana. Jose, please stand from RAP. He is dedicated to making sure formerly incarcerated individual himself has taken the lead, did work while he was incarcerated to change the lives of hundreds of men, and did a fantastic job. And now, since release, he's been working to make sure that we release our elder prisoners. Now people say, well, you know, the bill that we have is if you're 55 years old and you've served 15 years of your sentence, that you should have the ability to go to before the parole board, and if you've done everything that you're supposed to do, be released from prison. Now people say to me, well, you're 55 years old, you can commit crimes. The problem is that we have to get out of this mentality that our institutions, the correction institutions, are solely for punishment, and it's for rehabilitation. And as a result, when I visit the facilities and I speak to people that are incarcerated, young men and women, mostly of color, and they say, we need programs, we need college education. And by the way, those that do get college education, their recidivism rate is minimal. And so we have to think beyond the box. We have to think that the reforms we're going to do to our correction system is going to save us millions of dollars. Because to keep a person incarcerated costs us anywhere between $100,000 and $200,000 in taxes. And when you have older men, women that are incarcerated, that commit very little to no crime, have one of the lowest recidivism rates, it just doesn't make any sense. Where I'd rather take that $100,000, $200,000 and award scholarships to brown and black children in our communities to go to college. That is what we should be spending money on. Now we have to also recognize that working in a correctional system is a very difficult and dangerous task. And our corrections officers deserve also to have a good working environment and receive the proper training. They deserve that also. Now, being the chair of the committee is not just about corrections and parole, but it's also about crime victims. And we have worked diligently to make sure that the rights of crime victims are protected, that when needed, they need financial assistance, that they get it. And we're doing that, and we've been doing that in the Senate now with this past legislative session. Victims deserve protection, and victims also have rights. Now, as your state senator, I promise to continue to fight for our children, for our seniors, for our working families, for our poor families, and for the most marginalized people in the state of New York and in this country. I pledge to do that with my dying breath, and I hope that you can join me. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Sepúlveda. I am the son of 2 Puerto Rican parents. I am the son of a former factory worker, husband to Elizabeth Sepulveda, who is my wife. She is my partner. She is my world. And she has helped me so much in my career representing this community. And I'm also so proud to say that she is now a first-year law student. I also have my youngest son, Luis Enrique, who many of you have followed over the years. And now we call him the piano player. He's a wonderful child who has to sacrifice time with Daddy, and he is the light of my eyes. And when I speak about him, I get emotional because we have spent some time separate from each other, because when I'm in Albany, it's time lost with our children. It's a big sacrifice, but I love you, Luisito. And my son, Julian, I've said it many times that if I knew he was going to be so smart and do so well, I would have been a lot nicer to him. He has made me proud beyond pride. Graduated from college, working in City Hall in different capacities, and now he is dedicated in his capacity working with the Department of Education to improving the educational system of the children of the city. I also want to thank my good friend Julia